So Ann and John, the Giraffe Heroes Project and Giraffe Heroes International, is that correct? How did it get started?
The story. I was in New York. John was at the UN. We were in a writers group that met in my living room every Tuesday night. And I had started finding giraffe stories and writing them up because I was getting really disgusted with what's presented to us as news, because it's all so bleak. And I don't believe in good news. I think that gets a little stupid. The things are a mess. Mm-hmm. But there's usually somebody who's got an idea or a project or something that's working. And I want to know about that. I don't want to just stop at, here's this god-awful thing, don't you feel terrible now? So I started finding people who were sticking their necks out and writing them up. And I was reading the stories in the writers group in the evenings on Tuesdays. And John was, what were you writing about? You were writing about...
I was trying to write about my foreign service career.
Right.
And I listened attentively to Ann's stories, but the idea of actually telling stories to inspire other people didn't make a lot of sense to me. Because
it's silly.
Well, I was...
You have to lecture them. You have to tell them what to do.
I had the too many college degrees and stuff, and it's like I was in my head, and I just didn't see the power of storytelling. So I thought, this is a nice blonde lady doing this. It's kind of nice, but it'll never change anything. And so I helped her with some of the administrative things of starting the Giraffe Heroes Project, writing the bylaws, stuff like that. And didn't really understand the power of what she was doing until I began to see that everybody else seemed to understand it quite well. And she was getting a lot of notoriety and a lot of interest from media in New York. And I finally got it, that these stories of people sticking their necks out were far more powerful than me giving a wonderful speech about you should stick your neck out, you should be involved in service to others. Telling stories was a much more powerful vehicle, and I had to figure that out, and Ann was my teacher at that point.
So I had to get the intro of the organization in, but in preparing for the interview, you guys are stories yourself. So Ann, you were a speechwriter for the Aga Khan. You've written, you've acted, you've done so many different things. Tell us a little bit more about Ann.
Wow. It's always come back to writing. My interest in theater was wanting to write for theater. I mean, everything has always been writing for me. And when it came to looking at what could I contribute, what did I have to give, it had to be writing, because that's what I know how to do.
Well, why did you feel that you had to give something instead of just doing everything for yourself?
How do you explain that? I'm not sure. We keep finding it in the giraffes that we tell stories about. We ask them too, and they'll just say, I had to. It was a compelling thing that they had to do it. So I'm not sure what the motivation is. I just know sometimes you got to.
And with the Giraffe Heroes Project itself and Giraffe International, I mean, you're the founder, and do you have a specific role that's different from anybody else?
In how it works now?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm the ringmaster.
The ringmaster.
Trying to keep the plates going on the sticks. I manage a lot of writers who are working on telling the stories and getting them online, which is our main outlet now, is telling stories by the website.
Others call her the soul of the project, and that's accurate. And is the epitome of the spirit that giraffes are giraffes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think one of the things is encountering Joseph Campbell. As he was retired, he was teaching in New York, and whenever he would turn up in a venue, I'd go and listen to him talk. And we also spent some time with him in California. And it made me realize that what had me was an archetype in the Jungian sense, that the archetype of the fool is Giraffe Heroes. The guy who is walking straight for a cliff, he's not listening to anybody, that it's dangerous, he's not stopping, he's going to do what he's got to do. So giraffes are holy fools.
John, There's not an easy way to describe you and your background, quite frankly, because you have multiple college degrees and experiences that people do movies about. You were a statesman in the sense that you worked for the State Department. You were an advisor to a U.S. senator. You were in jail in Iran. You were lots of different places. Tell us a little bit about you and what motivates you all these years to work with Giraffe Heroes.
Well, I have a stump speech, and it focuses on the importance of finding meaning in one's life and how one might do that. And I always give my example as the worst way to do this, because when I was a young man, the only thing that meant anything to me, the only thing that had meaning to me was adventure. And I got totally hooked. It all began when I was 17 years old and went off to sea in the Far East as a seaman on a freighter. And at 17, these were not container ships now in the late 1950s. We're talking about freighters with a 50 or 60 rough guys running them. I'm 17 years old, and these men were determined to teach me some lessons that I would never get from college, and they did. Anyway, I came back and was totally hooked on adventure after all the color and excitement of being in Asia as a seaman for the summer. So I kept taking one adventure after the other, and each one was more dangerous than the one before. So I began to realize that I was probably invulnerable. So I climbed dangerous mountains. I hitchhiked around the world. Midway through college, I put myself in the war in Algeria and reported on that for the Boston Globe over the summer. After college, I hitchhiked around the world, and that's a whole series of stories.
That's when you were in jail in Iran.
That's when I was in jail in Iran. I did all this kind of stuff. So at a certain point, I realized that I had to make a living. I wasn't independently wealthy, nor were my parents. So I decided, well, how can I be an adventurer and get paid for it? And I thought, well, how about the U.S. Foreign Service? I'll be a diplomat. It was pretty naive, but it turned out to be exactly right, because I got into that part of the Foreign Service where I dealt with wars and revolutions, arms sales. I never spent a day in a fancy embassy in Europe wearing striped pants. I was always off in the third world someplace, except for the final tour in New York City. And I just kept it up. I was in the middle of the revolution in Libya. In fact, I'm a talking head these days for Russia's equivalent of CNN. I do Skype interviews with them on Libya because I did the first biographic reports on Muammar Gaddafi. He and I are the same age. And then I went from there to the war in Vietnam. All of which was, I say, one adventure after the other. And then another factor came in, and that was power. I was becoming a fairly senior diplomat because I was smart and tough and did my job well, and I kept surviving all these dangerous places, so the State Department kept promoting me. So I was doing it for the adventure, I was doing it for the power, but my life became increasingly empty, and I began to feel that, and it began to really gnaw at me. And it sort of all came to a head. It began in Vietnam, where I realized that I had the power of life and death over a lot of people, and my life was too shallow to deal with that. I was just, I'll be honest, I was, I think, a very shallow person as a young man. Adventure, power, the idea of service, giraffe type stuff never occurred to me. But finally I got to New York, and I had an important role, I would say, in the ending of apartheid. And I took a lot of risks, because when I went to South Africa in the apartheid years, and most of your viewers will remember apartheid was a system of institutionalized racism in South Africa. And I saw what it was like in South Africa, and I came back angry, and this is something that has to be fixed. I have to do something to do this. So I poured myself into that and was able to actually do some things that helped end apartheid. And the idea of doing good with my life, using my talents to be of service, to help solve a public problem, totally changed my life. I got hooked. This time it wasn't so much on adventure, although many of my service work since then have been terrific adventures. But it was like, I got hooked on doing good. It was just at that time when I met Anne. and she had started the Giraffe Heroes project. I thought, oh wow, this is a very nice lady, I'll help her out as I can, but I really didn't see the point of telling stories.
You didn't see the point of a giraffe. What's that got to do?
Inspiring other people. I thought, I was still a Harvard guy. I still thought that you could get people to do good by preaching at them, giving a wonderful speech, which I could do. And I didn't understand the power of storytelling until I learned it from Anne. So it's about at that point where the two threads come together, where Anne and I met in New York, and I was a recovering diplomat. I just had a great dose of idealism from my work in helping end apartheid and some other things at the United Nations. Anne was starting the Giraffe Project, and we just put everything together. And I really learned that the meaning in my life could only come from service. I'm so bold as to tell audiences that I think is probably true for most of us, that it doesn't come from adventure, it doesn't come from power, it doesn't come from money. It comes from making a difference in other people's lives. And ever since then, this was now 31 years ago, I've focused in that direction.
All right, let's talk as much as we can now about your work and the heroes that you come in contact with. There's two maps behind us. There are blue dots all over the place. Let's take the United States. A lot of blue dots there. How do you find giraffes? Where do you find them, and what do you do for them?
Well, some of them will come in from people who watch this. It just happens when
I hope you get an explosion.
There you go. When we're out there and we're in a magazine or a newspaper or on a television program, then people say, well, I know somebody who's like that. And they can go on our website, there's a nomination form there. And they just fill out the information and send it to us. And then there's a jury of volunteers who meet to read all the nominations and decide.
It's now over 1,100, right, Anne?
Oh yeah, more than.
Yeah. So since early 1980s, 1,100 people have been honored as Giraffe Heroes. And they are, of course, men and women, although I think slightly more women than men, actually.
Yeah, that was good. When I first started, one of the other advisors, besides John, said, well, now you're going to have to do a really hard job finding women because courage is a man's issue.
Really? When was, oh my goodness.
I didn't ask him for any more advice.
So John, you have offices, or at least representative offices around the world.
We don't have offices. We have recognized giraffes in over 60 countries.
Oh, right.
And we have now created, we've been working overseas at some capacity from almost the beginning. For example, we had a program in Moscow during the breakup of the Soviet Union, and that's a whole other series of stories about the impact giraffes had when the Soviet Union disappeared.
Yeah, that's always been important because I hate the xenophobia that says only we are like this. It's a human thing to do this, to be compassionate and courageous and work for the common good. It hasn't anything to do with nationality. So we've never said this is American. It's human.
And we have increased the focus on the global giraffes, and that's maybe that's because of me, because I keep thinking I'm still I love the Foreign Service, I love foreign travel. So we created what you might in business call a wholly owned subsidiary called Giraffe Heroes International, in which we spend some significant time in other countries and help them start basically what are clones of the Giraffe Project. We began in Kyrgyzstan, Giraffe Heroes Kyrgyzstan. That was about 4 or 5 years ago. I was in Nigeria 2 years ago. We took the program to the UK, to the Muslim community in the UK last year, and are building a program there working with moderate imams in the UK to try and provide a greater sense of meaning and hope to young disaffected Muslim youth who are a real problem in the UK. They're the ones that run off to Pakistan and come back and strap bombs around themselves, blow up subways, so it's a real problem. So we're working with Muslims in the UK. I just got back from Sierra Leone. They had a vicious civil war there, 10 years, think blood diamonds, child soldiers. So we're creating a program in which we will work with NGO partners, nonprofit partners in Sierra Leone to find Sierra Leoneans who are acting with courage and compassion to do something to help rebuild the country. And we'll broadcast their stories by radio into the bush, which is the only way you can reach everyone in Sierra Leone. And I'm going to Nepal in 3 weeks to do the same thing in Nepal, and here our work will be more political. We're working with NGOs that are trying to forge a middle ground between the Maoists on the left and the Royalists on the right, who also fought each other in a civil war just 5 years ago. So
yeah, and in most of these places, there is a giraffe in place, at least one.
Yes.
Somebody who's been named a giraffe hero by, our operation, and they sort of become the focal point for a local operation.
You've got some playing cards, trading cards, something in front of you, and you have heroes all around you. Tell us how they both work together.
Right. Well, one of the things that we've done to popularize the stories is giraffe trading cards. And each card has a different hero story on it. They're from all over the world, men, women, kids, every kind of issue. And the kids get to play with them and trade them. And they get to make their own, because we created some that are blank, so the kids get to put a picture and a story on that they find on the cards.
Now you also have something called, is it Stand Tall and Be Tall? Is that right?
For the really young kids, we have 2 cartoon characters who are siblings. They're twin young giraffes. And they find stories and tell them to the kids through the cartoon characters.
Is there a single theme of what it takes to be a giraffe, or the work that they're doing, or is it just all over the map?
The underlying thing is always it's compassionate, and always it's courageous, and it's for the common good. But what it is, this guy electrified his village by building things out of old bicycle parts. Here's a woman in India who founded one of the first microloan things for women. This guy was dealing with corruption in New Delhi in the government. So the issue could be anything, as long as working on it serves the common good.
John, so much of our world is good and bad, yin and yang, and it's always one versus the other. At Rainmakers, we kind of prefer to call it successes and successes yet to be. When you go into a new country, or a country where you've been many times before, and you're talking with them about giraffe, how is it that you are able to say, this is a success yet to be, so to speak?
Well, I think it's the same as in this country. A person who is sticking their neck out is something special, and some of them seem to be born with it, and others, it may be they're forced into it by seeing a problem so terrible, no one else is acting on it, so they look around and say, gee, here's this, like this fellow, the fellow fighting corruption in Delhi. Nobody else was doing something about corruption that was debilitating the whole country. So this guy says, I'm going to do it. So he risked his job to take his own bosses to court. And it was a huge risk for this guy. Was he born that way? In this case, and in many cases, he just saw a problem nobody else was solving. And so he moved to solve it. So what we're looking for is people who are responding to problems, not by putting their head in the sand. In Sierra Leone, for example, things are so bad there. I mean, there's people walking around without any limbs, for example, and some of them have just given up. But I met a bunch of them that weren't giving up, who were saying, look, I'm missing a hand, but others are worse off than I am. And if I can show people that missing a hand, I can become a bicycle mechanic, I can go to law school, I can whatever, then I'll inspire other Sierra Leoneans who have both hands, who can do even better than that. So we're looking for that kind of a spirit, and you begin to see it often in small things. Just a person just doing a small thing. And sometimes it's a big thing. Sometimes it's in direct response to a pain they see and they want to help ease. And sometimes it seems to be just coming up from their heart someplace. They were born with it or whatever. But I mean, as Anne is always saying, you can find the giraffe in everyone. And we think that's true. I mean, there's a giraffe spirit in everyone. And in a lot of people, they've just forgotten it, or they've boarded it over, or they've had other people tell them it's stupid, so they've sort of forgotten about it. But what our work does, by telling these stories, and by giving speeches, writing books, and as a blog, we try to elicit that spirit. And then when people are energized, to try to help give them some skills as well as motivation to go out and solve that problem. And as Ann was saying, we do this now in schools all over the world too.
I think one of the sweetest things that's happened that I didn't expect was how the giraffes respond themselves. We send them a package that has a certificate they can hang on the wall, and a pin to wear, and a letter about what we're doing. And it's very minimal. I mean, we're not giving them $1,000, nothing. It's just this award. And we get these messages back saying, I am so used to people telling me to shut up and sit down, or people telling me I'm crazy, and you're telling me I'm a hero? Thank you.
Is there a difference between the heroes in the United States and then the ones in New Delhi or wherever?
I don't think so. No.
No, they think that the main criteria are always the same: courage and compassion,
And common good.
And working for the common good. The issues are different. I mean, in Sierra Leone, for example, some absolutely, totally basic issues have to be solved, where in this country, sometimes the issues may seem to us a bit more sophisticated. Like, you know, what do we do with our frozen politics in Congress? But the core of it is what motivates these people to act. I think it all comes from the fact that somewhere along the line, they too have sought meaning in their lives, and some of them have gone down some wrong trails like I did, but they've all come to the point that what gives meaning to their lives is service, is helping make life better.
And tell me your 2 or 3 favorite heroes, and John, get ready because you're next.
Well, I guess the story...
Or is it more there's like 200 or 300 favorite
Yeah,
ones?
it's hard for me to pick a favorite because it's usually the last one I read, that I love the most. But I think one that moves people most extraordinarily is 2 guys in San Diego. One is an immigrant. He's actually an Ismaili Muslim, one of the Aga Khan's people, and the other is a black American who works for the city government. And the black guy's grandson was in a gang initiation and shot the Muslim son. And the Muslim, whose name is Azim Kamisa, said when he got over the initial astonishment of what had happened, he realized that 2 families had lost sons because the murderer's son family was going to lose their son too. And he reached out to the other family, and those 2 guys worked together, going into schools and speaking against violence and gangs. The 2 men who have so many reasons to not be together. And I just think that's magnificent.
Yeah, it truly is. John?
I feel the same way Ann does. There's so many great stories. One of the ones I like a lot is a high school kid from a small town in Idaho. He's a Mexican-American kid, and he's a star player on the football team. And because of him and other Mexican-American players on that team, the team was really good. These were good athletes. It was heading for the state championship. And everything was copacetic, except that in this town, there was a strong racist element. So whenever one of the Mexican-American players would catch a touchdown pass, people would cheer, but whenever the opposite happened, he dropped it or made some other error, there'd be rude calls from the stand. These stupid Mexican, spick, whatever, So this guy, his name was Neto, nickname was Neto. He got organized the Mexican-American players to stop, to tell the coach and the school they would not play another game until the insults stopped. Well, you know what the adults did, of course. The coach said, boys, we're heading for the state championship. We'll have to, if we start forfeiting games, forget it. And then he turned to Neto and says, Neto, you're headed for a football scholarship to university. It's the only way you'll ever get to college. and this is in jeopardy now because if you stop playing, you won't get the football scholarship. And Neto didn't give up. He went over the coach's head, went over the principal's head to the school board, found a school board member who would allow him and a few other people that he got as allies to read a statement over the loudspeaker system at the homecoming game. And the statement said, there will be no racial epithets or racial name calling in the stadium. Anyone who was doing that would be tossed out of the stadium. And they read that before the next game started, and everyone stood up and cheered. And it solved the problem, not just for the football stadium, but for this whole small town where people were sort of using racial epithets as a matter of course. They didn't really understand how bad it was. And this 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid taught the whole town a lesson. As I remember, the story we wrote about him was called The Touchdown for Tolerance. But he risked everything when you're 17 years old. He risked everything for a principle. And the service he did was, of course, striking a blow against racism in a small town in a rural state.
The stories, they're on your website?
All of them.
You have an incredibly useful website. Can you give us just a kind of a synopsis as how a member of the public could use your website to learn more?
Yeah, well, the main thing is to go to giraffe.org, and across the nav bar, one thing you see is Find a Hero. And if you click on that, you go into an online database, and you can put in where, gender, subject, anything you're looking for, and hit search, and you'll get all the stories that fit. There's also a lot of material for teachers, and there are free lessons they can use in classes. Families can get the Stand and Be stories for young kids free on the website.
All right, for both of you, look 20 years down the road, and now you're going to look back, and you're going to see how you did. How'd you do?
Well, I'm already more than 20 years in.
Yep, sorry, you got at least 20 years to go.
20 more? Yeah. I've always wanted giraffe to be a verb. I would like giraffe it to be an admonition to people.
On my tombstone, I want them to put, I was marvelously used up. I would like to think that my focus on service will stay strong. I'm sure it will. And in a way, you know, the strategy for my life has been set for a long time. I'm about service. I don't say that in a smarmy way. I'm not Mother Teresa, believe me, she knows that. I'm just doing what I can, using my skills, being of service where I can. And I'm never going to stop doing that. So the strategy is set. What changes is the tactics. Hopefully, we get better and better doing what we do. We tell giraffe stories better, we are able to convince people better, we give a better speech, whatever. So I'm just trying to do things better.